On this spot, in the 12th century, the Cistercian monks founded an abbey. The monks withdrew, and for centuries Stanlow remained bleak and lonely. Now, the marsh has vanished. For in the years following the Second World War, there has been rising here one of the larger oil refineries in the modern world to feed and foster the working strength of 20th century Britain.
It was March 1948 that we kicked off with a series of meetings between the engineers and contractors to line up the work. The chief construction engineer took the chair. The site of the new refinery lay close to the existing installations at Stanlow and the chemical plant, about a mile south of the Manchester Ship Canal. Further west, where the Ship Canal joins the Mersey at Eastham, the Canal Company were making their contribution to the project. They were building the largest oil dock in the world, large enough to berth 4 28,000-ton super tankers at once. The cooling water, very important in refinery operations, was to be pumped in through lines from the Ship Canal. After circulating through the plants, it would be cooled down again in a giant concrete tower before going back to the canal. The building of this tower alone would be a sizable job. We planned to tackle the work in 4 stages, from early 1948 to late 1951. Stage 1, December 1949, would see the first distillation unit ready. Its function was to split up crude oil into petrol and fuel oils, and so help to relieve the petrol shortage. Stage 2, July 1950, would see the completion of the reformer for improving the quality of the petrol. Then, in the 3rd stage, we were to build a second and much larger distillation unit and have it running by June 1951. Last, the catalytic cracking plant, the cat cracker for getting more and better petrol, was to come on stream at the end of the 4th stage in December 51. As we went along, we were to connect up the new installations with the existing refinery and the chemical plant, so that when it was finished, the whole layout would work as a single unit, making a wider range of petroleum products than any other in Europe. And the job at its peak would require a labor force of 4,000 men. By the spring of '49, we were pretty well underway. Before we could set the main lines for the cooling water to and from the canal, we had to blast away hundreds of tons of rock and sandstone. We used sheet piling to support the sides of the trenches for the water lines, then circular reinforcement for the lines themselves. They'd be 8 feet in diameter and nearly 1.5 miles long. There was a hill between the Ship Canal and the refinery, and to bring the water lines under it, the civils had to bore over 1 mile of tunnel. First, they sank an 80-foot shaft straight down into the middle of the hill. Then they started tunneling, outwards in both directions from the shaft bottom, and inwards from each end. By summer, the base of the cooling tower was nearly ready. A huge reinforced concrete raft, 260 feet across. At the same time, we were working ahead, pouring the concrete for the other plants as well. In the case of the foundations for the cat cracker, which would have to take an enormous weight, the great thing was to get the concrete to set as a single mass, a solid lump, so to speak. So we just went on and on without stopping. Round the clock and round again. 1,000 cubic yards in 24 hours. For some time, they'd been putting up the really big cranes. Derricks, they're called. The largest were 200 feet high and could lift about 75 tons apiece. Then, before we knew it, the scaffolding for the cooling tower was going up. A great circular silver web in the autumn sky. All this time, the pipe that we would need later on was coming in. Hundreds of miles of it. And it went on coming in too, all through the job. Now those plates, like flower petals, are the beginnings of the gas storage tanks. Horton spheres, we call them. They form segments to which other curved plates will be welded, so as to make a complete globe. This is how things looked towards the end of '49. Steel going up everywhere. Riveters chattering from one end of the site to the other. The parts of the jigsaw were beginning to fit. Soon the towers of Distillation 1 were pushing their way up through the maze. And in November, it was going on stream. That meant we'd finished the first stage on time. And less than a year later, petrol came off the ration. Round about Christmas time of '49, about a third of the shell of the cooling tower was up and getting higher every day. In the new year, the welders were busy on the oil storage tanks, rows and rows of them. When they were finished, the whole lot together would hold over 500,000 tons of crude oil and manufactured products. And over there, across the site, you could see the framework of the cat cracker climbing up into the air. Meanwhile, the tunnelling crews had been drilling their way through that hill. And now the borings for the water line had almost met. It was a cold March morning up above when they blew the last barriers. Now the tunnel ran all the way through the hill, right from the refinery to the site of the intake pump house on the banks of the ship canal. We'd scheduled the reformer for July 1950, but actually it was ready long before that in April. And so we finished stage 2, nearly 3 months ahead of ourselves. With distillation 1 and the reformer both finished on time, we could sit back for a moment and look round. Roads and pipe tracks were beginning to crisscross the site. And beyond, distillation 2 and the cat cracker were coming along very nicely. And now we were off on stage 3, the longest pull of the lot, because it meant a great deal of special construction and chemical engineering. They say that in olden times, this whole area was a bog, with a monastery somewhere in the middle. I wonder what the monks would have made of all this. Away down the ship canal at Eastham, the oil dock was taking shape. To bring the crude oil from the tankers, which would berth there, to the refinery, we had to put down a 7-mile pipeline. At one place, we had to take the pipeline under the canal. And this is how we did it, all in one piece.